Good evening, everybody. Ready to start? Excellent. Well, I'm here with head men's basketball coach Tom Crean and Tom Morrison, who's the vice president for capital planning and facilities with the university. Appreciate everybody being here today and answering all your questions at one time. It was ironic that I was in Assembly Hall when this happened today. We were having our very first kickoff meeting of the renovation team for the new Assembly Hall. So we had our chief university architect, our chief university engineer, Vice President Morrison, our outside structural engineers, our outside architect. That whole group was together in Assembly Hall. We met at 2:30. Shortly after that meeting started, a couple of our facilities folks, including Chuck Crabb, were called out of that meeting because of something that apparently happened in the bowl. A few minutes later, I went out to check with Scott Dolson and some others on what was going on, and we realized that this piece of metal had fallen down in the bowl. So that was about 2:30. We got in there probably about 20 minutes after that, interacted with our university engineer, and based on his advice, concluded around 3:30 that we should cancel or postpone and reschedule tonight's game. So that was made on the advice of Jeff Caden, the university's chief engineer. We were immediately in contact even before the decision to postpone with our partners at the Big Ten, reached out to the folks at Iowa. I contacted Tom to let him know. Tom Crean, he came over immediately. So again, the decision was made within about an hour of the incident occurring, and it was fortunate and lucky, matter of happenstance, that this group of people were in Assembly Hall, because I think it really made the assessment, the decision making go much quicker than it otherwise would have. Once the decision was made about 3:30, we reached out to let folks know. I talked to Fran McCaffrey at Iowa. Talked to the folks at the Big Ten Network, also talked to Dave Brandon, the AD at Michigan, because we have a women's basketball game scheduled for tomorrow night, and we issued the announcement, I think it was about 10 till 4. So from the time it fell at 2:30, made the decision about an hour, about 20 minutes after that, advised the public that we wouldn't be having the game. Going forward, we are in conversations with Iowa on when the men's basketball game will be rescheduled. Under Big Ten rules, we have 72 hours as institution to institution to find a mutually acceptable date. Both Indiana and Iowa are confident that we'll be able to accomplish that. In the event that it's not rescheduled within 72 hours by agreement of the teams, then the Big Ten conference makes that decision. We've also concluded, based upon again, advice from Jeff Caden, the chief university engineer, that the women's basketball game will go on as scheduled tomorrow night, because we're able to handle the anticipated capacity within the midsection or the red section, if you will, of Assembly Hall, away from the corners where the metal had dislodged this afternoon. So again, I talked to David Brandon about that, and my understanding is Michigan is on their way to Bloomington. I should also mention that we appreciate the generosity of Trustee Jim Morris, the president of Indiana Pacers, who offered to have the game played, the men's basketball game against Iowa, played in Bankers Life Fieldhouse. After consultation with our event staff, we concluded that logistically that's just not anything we could put together on 24, even 48 hours notice. We understood the appeal of potentially having Iowa be able to play while they were still here, even if it delayed a little bit. But because of the uncertainty of returning to Assembly Hall and the logistical challenges of playing in Bankers Life Fieldhouse, we respectfully declined the Pacers' offer, but we appreciate it very much. In terms of what happened, we're still trying to sort that out, but we've had the benefit of having not only the chief engineer of Indiana University review the situation both internally in Assembly Hall and actually physically. He just returned from the roof, and I just got a report from him. We also had two external structural engineers make a preliminary review of the situation. Fink Roberts and Petrie are the structural engineers hired for the renovation. Again, as I mentioned, they were here in Assembly Hall, and they were able to make a visual inspection of what happened. And then the folks from RC Engineering, who are our ongoing structural engineer for Assembly Hall, and I assume other aspects of the university, also took part, and they had representatives on the roof inspection today too. So we have some preliminary feedback on sort of what went wrong and what happened, but I want to really emphasize that it's preliminary and subject to change once they get up and make a more immediate visual and physical interaction with this facing that is in Assembly Hall. And it's 100 feet in the air, so it's not the easiest thing to access. We've had to call in special equipment from Indianapolis to be able to physically, I assume it's like a cherry picker, something like that, to get up close to the facing. So I'm not an engineer, so bear with me, but in the four corners of Assembly Hall, there is a facing of steel plating that runs basically from each side up into the middle at a mild curve, if you will. And the preliminary assessment is that with the snow and ice accumulation, it's settled at the lowest point in that curve in such magnitude that it essentially popped that bottom plate off. And it was about a 6 foot, 8 foot by 1 foot piece of metal, weighs about 50 pounds, popped off that facing. So we think that the issue is limited to the plate that is at that, whatever an inverted apex is, the bottom of that curve in each one of the four corners of Assembly Hall. Of course, we're going to be inspecting all the plating on all that facing and not limiting it to the three remaining pieces of plating at those three bottom portions of the curve. That's the preliminary assessment from the engineers. I'm also advised that the plating is actually ornamental, that it serves no structural purpose, and so a preliminary view is that we may just remove all that plating, or maybe just if any's loose, we'll get the details from the engineer. But again, the preliminary assessment is that it's a fairly focused issue, but we'll be doing a complete review from top to bottom of those areas of Assembly Hall. So that's a lot of information. Maybe I'll stop and take a breath there, and I'd be happy to entertain questions, and Tom Morrison and Tom Crean are also available if anybody has any questions for them.
Coach, where were you at the time, and what did you observe?
Well, first it was behind closed doors. We're getting ready for our walkthrough and putting the finishing touches on what we wanted to accomplish there, and I didn't have my phone with me at first, and then when I got my phone, I responded to Fred's voicemail and text right away, and then literally dropped what we were doing and got to the gym as quick as possible. And you know, obviously it's a very tough situation to look at. You feel bad for everybody involved, but at the same time you look at it and you just absolutely realize that a incredible tragic crisis could have been averted, or was averted, I should say. And so you have to look at it from that lens, and from that point on, we just did everything we could do to be supportive, look at what the contingency plan would be before we met with the team, and then decide to go forward and have practice and treat it like it's a day before a game practice, not knowing if it would be or not, and continue on the way we would have.
Fred, you mentioned that you declined the Pacers' offer at Bankers Life Fieldhouse. What were the communication? What was that process like as far as talking with Iowa about that? Did they have any sort of say or input as far as supporting your decision on that?
Jim Morris contacted my office, but I was hard to get a hold. My phone went dead because I was out doing things, and my secretary actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, Jim's calling, and here's the offer." So I powwowed with our event staff on how we can make that work logistically, and all that, and the feeling was on a 24-hour, 48-hour turnaround, that just didn't make sense. Iowa was open to playing at Bankers Life Fieldhouse if it worked, and they were here, and would have been happy to stay, and that normally would have made sense if we were able to pre-plan that. But as the host, I think it was our responsibility to decide whether we could appropriately host a Big Ten game on that short notice, and my conclusion, based on advice from our event staff, was that we could not.
Will there be a complete assessment of the roof area of Assembly Hall? I'm sure it's fairly worrisome that you would have that much ice accumulation, perhaps snow, that would cause this to happen. How would you go about looking at the structural integrity of that area?
Yeah, let me try that, and then Tom may will undoubtedly have a better, more informed response. We the university examine the roof structure here, particularly because its unique nature, every other year. So it's on a regular inspection schedule, and ironically, I guess, we had our most recent inspection late summer, early fall of this year. Again, the preliminary report from the engineers, and I hesitate to get into preliminaries, but I know you guys will ask me, so I'll tell you what I know, is that the popping off of this wasn't from a corrosive, long-term event. It was from more of a traumatic, immediate event. And you know, the load that this roof has had to take has been, you know, pretty unusual. Everybody knows the snow and ice and cold conditions that we've had. So from interacting with Tom Morrison, I think we're fairly are quite comfortable that the appropriate inspections are being made. It'll be even better after this round with the structural engineers. But it doesn't sound like this. It doesn't sound like this was a long-term maintenance issue, but rather a traumatic event connected with a immediate weather situation.
Yeah, we did just complete last summer the biennial review of the roof structure here. It's something we do on a regular basis. The roof itself was replaced about 3 years ago, and so it's a new roof. This condition that occurred at the joint between the roof and the north wall. And as Fred said, we believe preliminarily that it's a weather issue related to the amount of snow and ice that's up there. Looking forward, as we look into renovations, ironically, and again, we were just talking about this today, is that we will be engaging structural engineers to do a complete assessment of the roof structure for all of those types of elements. The roof is designed, every roof is designed to have some give to it, and this one did, but the amount of weight that's up there is somewhat exceptional.
Dustin.
You mentioned logistics would be the reason why you would be able to take it up to Baker's Life. I guess elaborate on that. What are some of the logistics that, what all would have to be done and what specifically makes it impossible to do?
Well, we have all of our season ticket holders who would have to transfer their seating arrangement here to Bankers Life Fieldhouse. It's not all apples to apples. People have scheduled their lives to some extent around when the game's going to be. It'll be very short notice. The game's turning around on a couple days' notice. And just the collective efforts that need to go into putting on a Big Ten game, our event staff felt like we couldn't do it in a way that they were comfortable with.
Tom, considering the way the weather has warmed up over the past couple of days, is there any chance that the weight of the snow plus the temperature affected kind of the elasticity of the cables that were out there?
Sure. Again, preliminarily, it looks like it's a weather event, and sure, you could make the case that today we've gone from what has been an extended, long period of extreme cold, a lot of snow, and then everything starts to melt today. And so that all immediately gets heavier. And sure, so that is something that the engineers are certainly looking at. And like, as Fred said, they've now been able to do some visual inspection inside, and they've been out on the roof tonight and looking at that, and they did find that there is a high level of snow and ice in the low point of that curve. It's a scooped roof, And so at the low point is where it is. I can report from the engineers that the drains are working. Our concern initially is that the drains were frozen, like everything else you've probably seen in your homes. The gutters are freezing. The drains are working, but it's going to be slow. There's an awful lot up there.
Jim?
When do you anticipate being able to have a final answer that the building is solid and games can continue?
We will be bringing in a piece of equipment tomorrow that will, as Fred said, basically a lift that we'll put on the floor of Assembly Hall. It's about 100 feet in the air. So we will go up there and visually and physically look at all of those fascia panels. And if they need to come off, they'll come off. That's the good news. The good news is that the solution to the problem that we know of right now is just to take those pieces off if they are loose or they're not tight. And so we believe that potentially by noon tomorrow, assuming the equipment gets here in the morning and the engineers can get a look at it, that by noon tomorrow we'll know our status. But as Fred noted, we feel comfortable with women's basketball game tomorrow night, given the constraints in the seating, because we've got the problem fairly isolated.
So by tomorrow night, fans may know whether or not the next regular scheduled men's game will go on as scheduled.
And that's turn Fred.
I don't want to hedge, but we don't know what we don't know with the engineering review. But our hope is that we'll have enough information after they get in and confirm some of these preliminary beliefs as to what the issue is, that as early as tomorrow, we could confirm that our next regularly scheduled game will be able to be held in Assembly Hall. Now, that could change depending on what the engineers find out or find out they don't know, but I would say I hope that as early as tomorrow we can confirm when our next regularly scheduled game is. We're continuing to work with Iowa on when we would schedule the postponed game, and we are planning to have the women's game in with the limited seating. It's possible that we might have the situation corrected to the extent that there wouldn't even be seating limitations for the women's game tomorrow if indeed we take all those panels down and get the all clear from the engineer. But one way or another, seating capacity limited or seating capacity not limited, we'll have the women's game tomorrow.
Zach?
I guess you've been talking about the planned renovation. I mean, does this set that back at all, or is it too early to know? Or?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, we were meeting with our team today. We're off and running with that. It probably underscores the value of an even more detailed structural review here, not only on something as dramatic as what happened today, but stress tests on our HVAC system, our electrical system, our fire alarm system, all those things. I think if anything, it underscores the need to do that, and that we're grateful that we're being able to move forward with that.
Fred, if there is a bigger issue and you aren't able to play here, what are some of the options that you might look at besides Bankers Life?
Well, I hate to get too far down the road, but there's venues in the state that we would consider, but at least based on what the preliminary findings are today, I'm optimistic we'll be able to have this game here.
You just touched on a little just the timing of this really was fortunate. Can you kind of expound on that, the fact that nobody was in that area at the time, which really could have held up situation?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think Tom's first comment was, there's the glass is half full or the glass is half empty, and this glass is half full because nobody got hurt, and all this other stuff is manageable. And thank God we're not here talking about, a really serious situation. So, if it had to happen, I'm glad it happened the way it did. We're taking it extremely seriously. The safety of our fans, players, visitors is paramount in our mind, and everything else takes a back seat to that.
Did the president stop by this afternoon to check on the damage as well, and what was his take on this?
Yeah, I notified him immediately, even before we had made the judgment to postpone the game. He was very engaged the whole time, kept him advised of developments as they went along, and he made a personal visit over here today, probably around 6 o'clock, as his schedule allowed, and wanted to walk through every detail and get the report. from the engineers, looked at the piece of metal that had come down, and has continued to make sure that Tom and I keep him advised. So he's been very engaged, and his reaction was much like I think all of ours were. Thank goodness, this wasn't a tragedy.
Do you have any makeup dates in mind for the Iowa game?
No, we're working back and forth with Iowa on that, and again, I'm optimistic we'll get that concluded within the 72-hour window.
Coach, do you have any sense on when you might feel comfortable enough to go back in there and get on the floor? What sort of assurances would you like to have?
I mean, we'll just wait for the direction, but I mean, I think we would feel fine doing that tonight, to be honest with you. I mean, with the way it's very isolated. And I've learned a lot today, stuff I never thought I'd ever have to learn. But I mean, I'm really fortunate, as we all are, to have the team of people at Indiana, Tom, all of the engineers who were there, and everybody that's a part of Fred's team with Fred. I mean, it's just, you learn a lot. So I would think, even just walking back in there a little bit ago before this, that we would feel very comfortable with that. I don't think there's any issues with that. I think it's so isolated. And again, we'll wait till everybody says that it is isolated, but it certainly appears that way. And I would hope we could be back as soon as the next time we're ready to practice. We'll have to make some decisions based on that. Now, like I said, we practiced tonight with the thought that we could play tomorrow. I mean, right on to the point of having our pregame meal, and our pregame speaker in there, Jim Harbaugh, was in there speaking to the team. We've just tried to stay business as usual as much as we can. And our guys would have been comfortable playing it anywhere today. I mean, they were really ready to go. But we just have to try to temper that and get ready for the next situation, whether it's Iowa before, whether it's Northwestern, whatever it is. And I thought our guys, along with everybody at Indiana, just moved right on to exactly what had to be done at that particular moment. And it's very, very professionally done.
Just to follow up on that, it's hard to, at least for me to, if I hadn't seen it, to visualize, where this is in there. And I know you guys all have access to that after this and take all the pictures and stuff that you'd like to. But early on, we got the all clear from the engineer that the floor was fine, that we could have practice on the floor. We could have a game there if there were no fans there. So the floor area is in really good shape, and the fact that the roof itself is almost, well, it's new. It's within 3 years, and that it had been inspected recently gives us a great deal of comfort there. These metal things are on the side wall, and the seats that were hit were probably 2 or 3 seats right next to the wall. So without minimizing in any way, it is fairly isolated. So right now we have roped off the 4 blue corners, if you will, and the end zone bleachers. The engineers, both our head engineer at IU, internal, and the 2 structural engineers have given us an all clear on the areas other than the ones I just mentioned, and that's why we're comfortable going forward with the women's game and committing and saying to our friends at Michigan to come on down for that game tomorrow.
You mentioned working with Iowa on a makeup date. If you guys are able to come to an agreement on that and you're told that tomorrow what you're hoping to hear about the arena being good to go, would the makeup game be here at Assembly Hall then, or would you be open to having to play elsewhere if there's no agreement?
Yeah, our expectation is that we'll be able to have it as a home game. I mean, if unexpectedly this is different than we think it is now and we're shut down for the rest of the year, then I think we'd look at every contingency, including that one.
So as you know right now, the Assembly Hall roof and everything, there are no structural issues. Is that what you're saying? The overriding point. Is my understanding that correct?
Preliminarily, yes. The engineer, just before we walked in here, the engineers gave me the point that it is not critical. It appears to be a isolated case to those areas of where the roof meets or where the ceiling meets the wall. So no, there is nothing, and that was one of the questions, of course, that we asked as soon as they came back down from being up there. Did you see anything that causes us concern in terms of the structural viability of the building or the structural viability of the roof itself? And the answer was no.
If you had to get rid of all the metal plating, is that something you can do in a day? Is that a big project or is that a small thing?
Too early to tell. We have to get the piece of equipment in here, get it up there, see if we can reach it, know what it's gonna take to take those off. You know, it's a little bit of uncharted territory. Our university engineer, again, did tell me just a little bit ago that he thinks the process could go quickly. But too early to tell until we get up there tomorrow morning.
That's our thing, we want to go as quickly as we can, but it's all about safety first. So we've emphasized that, look, we can handle some uncertainty. We are working around the clock. We're moving this equipment overnight. We've had the external engineer from Indianapolis come down, so we're pulling out all the stops and we're going to move forward as quickly as possible. But the main thing is we're going to get it right, more importantly than getting it quick.
Anything else?
Is there a damage estimate of the cost of all this at this point?
No, not yet, and that is the least of our concerns at the moment. At some point, we'll tally what all this costs, but not anything we're thinking about.
Okay.
Real quick, coaches, I guess, how does this kind of shape you guys up just in terms of schedule? I mean, you never know when you're able to, fit this thing in. It might force you to have a tough turnaround somewhere in the future. Just
Well, I don't think there's any question about that. When you look, when you look at our schedule, their schedule, and you look at where the possibilities could be without having any true idea to this point yet, I mean, there's going to be no way around that. So, good catch. So, bottom line is you just adjust, and that's what we've done today. And our guys were extremely ready to play, in that sense. To be where we needed to be, to have that edge and that mindset to go into the game tonight. I'm disappointed that we didn't get to do that, but that pales in comparison to what any of us would have felt like at 9:30, 10 o'clock tonight if something would have happened inside of that building. And that's exactly how I said it to the players after practice. I mean, you have to keep something like this in absolute perspective while you're making your adjustments and contingency plans for what's ahead. And it's all part of resiliency. You just get ready to go do what you have to do when it's time to do it.
Have you faced a postponement before?
It's a good question. I think at one point weather-wise, at Marquette, potentially, but I'm not even 100% certain, maybe early on.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks.
The photographers and videographers